ShopGearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is sponsored by our store through Amazon. If you visit ShopGear.com, please remember to do that, because when you do, you provide gasoline to the engine known as Gear Radio Network, and that helps this podcast continue. It is the best way to shop for yourself and is the best way to support this podcast. Now, on with the show.
You're listening to Better Live Than Dead.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, welcome. Episode number 19 of Trust the Podcast. We are back. We're back. We are live. We're on the air. I'm Ryan Wolfe, at Wolfe BLTD, joined by at Del Reid on Tweetbots. Del, how you been? It's been a few months.
It has been. It feels really good to be doing this again with you, man. It's a little overdue, I think. Some of the stuff that's happened in the past week or so, but we're busy guys. We got a lot going on, but man, it feels good to be chatting it up with you, my man.
It's good. Hey, it's good to have you back. I know the reason we're here today is not as exciting as we would have hoped, because, you know, there's kind of a little bit of a somber feel to it. I've dubbed the podcast today the Tyrodcast, and just to let everybody know, Del's on the IndyCar Media Hotline. You can listen to us at betterlivethandead.com. Make sure you note that the website has changed. iTunes and Google Play Music as well. Subscribe, hear us, whatever. We'll talk about that later on. But the big reason why we're here today, the Buffalo Bills saw the Cleveland Browns trade party, which at this point feels like such old news. We've had such crazy amounts of news break in the past few days, even since this podcast was written. Right off the top, the Buffalo Bills trade Tyrod Taylor to the Cleveland Browns for a 2018 third-round pick, which is 65th overall. And I understand the logic behind it, but it always kind of sticks in my craw a little when someone says, okay, it's the 65th pick overall. It's the first pick of the third round, so technically it's a second-round pick. And I'm like, well, it's a third-round pick, but I get the logic behind it. But just to run down the stuff.
I guess there's a difference between essentially and technically. If people are saying technically, then they're
like, well, you know, it's
technically wrong.
Pick. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a third-round pick, but I get it. It's a second-round talent, but if they were second-round talent, they would have been drafted. I guess I'm just splitting hairs here because I used to be like that where I was like, oh, it's kind of like this. It's like, no, it's not really like that. But just to run down the numbers really quick, this move clears $9,692,000 from the cap. I'm sorry, I'm bad with numbers for some reason, apparently, per Spot Track, a very fantastic website. Tyrod Taylor's $16 million cap hit disappears, but a $5.56 million cap hit appears, along with a roughly slotted $748,000 contract for that third-round pick, which we'll talk about shortly. Now, the Bills and the Browns agreed that the Browns would pick up Tyrod's roster bonus due on 3/16, and now the Buffalo Bills own the five of the top 65 picks in the NFL draft coming up next month. It was 21 and 22. This is what I mean. Things have changed so fast. 12, 22, 53, 56, and 65. So I guess really we can kind of start off the top talking about Tyrod Taylor, what he did for the Buffalo Bills. And I want to start off with you, Del. What were your thoughts immediately when you saw this news come across and break?
Great return. I was very excited. And while we're not going to split hairs here between a second round and a third round pick. When you figure that he is, I believe, less than 20 spots lower than what the Pats got for Jimmy Garoppolo, which was like 48 or 43 or 45, something like that. When you compare those two compensations with each other, and you think of really the time that New England invested in Garoppolo as well, the draft pick that they invested, and what they got back for it, compared to really what the Bills invested in Tyrod and everything associated with that. Like, what a great return! I'm very very happy with it. To think that he went not too far behind, 2/3 of a round or whatever, but behind Jimmy Garoppolo. And good job for being. I mean, there's a prevailing thought going on that Tyrod was going to get just released. Instead, you turn what is a possible release into the first pick in the third round. Bravo to Bean. Now, all that being said, Tyrod did do a lot for the franchise. He provided a bit of stability at the quarterback position. I mean, we talked about it in the past. Like, he had a lot of shortcomings in terms of his performance on the field, and we can argue all day about whether it was scheme or whatever this past season. But it would be a waste of time because he's no longer on the team, so it doesn't really matter. So I was happy with the return. I'm grateful for what he provided the quarterback position for the team the past 3 seasons. But I'm ready to move on. Let's get the future started.
Well, looking back at it, I mean, I personally was kind of bummed about it, but you knew it was coming because the Buffalo Bills were rumored to be cutting him, like you said, Dal. And then it was almost kind of like a tongue in cheek, like, this is great. Like, what are the Bills going to be able to get for Tyrod Taylor? Because there were talks they were going to keep Tyrod, they were going to take the $6 million hit for the roster bonus, and then they would trade him afterwards. And obviously it happened before that. But to run down what Tyrod did in his time in Buffalo, he was the guy who helped end the drought. That says something. That will always be something you can never take away from him. He ends his Bills career with a 22-20 record in 3 years, 8,857 passing yards, 51 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. That's something he did fantastic. He protected the football, didn't take risks, but made smart decisions, I guess is the best way you could put it. 1,575 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns on the ground, 1 playoff appearance, thankfully, for ever and ever and ever. We never have to think about Rob Johnson again because before Tyrod Taylor started for the Bills in the playoff game, Rob Johnson was the last guy to start a game for the Bills in the playoffs. So thank God we can just forget about that. I mean, I had it in the notes here and thinking about it more, Buffalo knows and Buffalo knew the ceiling of Tyrod Taylor. And at this point, they have enough draft capital, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, especially with something I'm going to mention here. They knew what they would get out of Tyrod Taylor, and they felt the time was now to make a move. And they did just that. I mean, as I mentioned before, with the 22nd and 21st pick, the Bills trade Cordy Glenn a couple days later and get the right to they decide to swap first round picks. So it's Buffalo gets 12, Bengals get 21, and then the Bills and the Bengals swap a 5th and 6th round pick, and then obviously Cordy Glenn goes over to the Bengals. So that gives the Bills even more capital to move with. Because at this point, I mean, it's kind of like what Philadelphia did when they went and got Carson Wentz. They made a couple deals to move up to where they could get Carson Wentz. And at this point in time, looking back on it, and this really baffled me, Del. This brings us to our second point. The new drought beginning, the bad quarterback drafting drought. Buffalo has not successfully drafted a quarterback in the NFL draft, which obviously I don't know why I put that, since 1983. Jim Kelly, the first round pick in 1983. He had 101-59 record, 35,467 yards, and 160 career games. It doesn't really get good from there. I mean, you look down, you got Frank Reich, who went 5-15 in his career. He had 6,000 passing yards. You've got guys like Todd Collins, J.P. Lossman, Trent Edwards, E.J. Manuel, Cardale Jones, Nathan Peterman. None of these players have worked out. I mean, if we're looking back on it, revisionist history kind of, Trent Edwards really was the best bet, and then he was murdered in Arizona, that game where he was decapitated on the field, and it was allowed to happen. But this is why this list should tell you, these names should tell you, in my opinion, why you should never stop trying to go out and get the answer at quarterback. Because in the NFL these days, if you don't have a quarterback who can take over a game, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. It's I was just thinking of this as you were talking. So the Bills drafted Jim Kelly in 1983. That was 35 years ago. The franchise was 23 years old when he did that. So this franchise has gone longer without somebody of that quality. This is the longest drought or dearth in its history. So I don't know. That maybe that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but I just thought about that. Like, wow, it's been over 10 years longer than from the inception. Never mind.
You've got something because like you're looking at it right now, and you look back at J.P. Lossman, you look back at E.J. Manuel. It's almost like the Bills at those points in times were like, "Hey, we need to get a quarterback. We have to make a move." Where this year it feels like they didn't necessarily have to make a move, but there are very good quarterbacks, and not just one or two. There are potentially 5 very good quarterbacks that are available. And the Bills said, you know what? This is the year we're going to take our shot. And so far, it looks like it was the smart decision to make.
Holy crap! I'm so excited. Yeah, they are finally, somebody at the top has decided that Jerry Sullivan would say, if I could tweak that a little bit, the heroic run to 7-9, or I'll say the heroic run to the neighborhood of 8-8 is no longer good enough. That's finally been decided, because you just went 9-7 with Tyrod. I think they went 9-7, 8-8, and then 9-7 again. And you could probably bring him back for a 4th season, and he'd probably finish in that neighborhood between 7-9 and 9-7. And for this new regime, that's not good enough. You know, they're not here just to exist and middle around in the NFL. Their goal is to challenge the Patriots for their division and eventually win a Super Bowl title. And you're not going to do that by accepting good enough instead of great.
I totally agree. And I mean, there's room for improvement. If there's one spot where there's room for improvement, if you go out, for instance, and you're like, hey, we've got LaShawn McCoy, we're going to go out and draft Saquon Barkley. You're like, okay, why would you do that? I mean, I understand the logic behind it, but you think about it here, you go, we have Tyrod Taylor, we being the Bills, have Tyrod Taylor. We know what he can do. We know what he can't do. We know that we need an improvement at the position to make the next step, whether the next step is winning 10 games or winning, 12 in a playoff game or making a big splash, whatever it may be. The Buffalo Bills, at the end of the day, have realized the most important thing about the team is that they need to have a quarterback, and they want their guy. And the front office comes from Carolina, where they had their guy in Cam Newton. And now once you get the quarterback situation figured out, you can then worry about everything else. I mean, the Bills have gone out, made a couple moves. And I just want to throw this out there because I love the name. Star Lotulelei, if I'm not mistaken, is
you nailed it.
They picked. That's a fantastic name. It rolls right off the tongue. But they go out, they make that's a pretty big move. But then again, in the grand scheme of things, it's, they see an area they need to adjust and need to make themselves better at. And they've done that, which it feels different because this doesn't really happen with the Buffalo Bills. They usually go out, they'll draft a guy, they'll meddle a little. They'll say, we'll go out and pick up a B or a C type of player. He'll be okay. He's not going to be great. Will probably still look just as bad, if not worse. But now, again, you've got the Bills just blowing the cover off the thing and looking at it right now too. A lot of people were freaking out about Nathan Peterman starting for the Buffalo Bills. And this brings us to our third point of who replaces Tyrod Taylor. Not going to be Nathan Peterman, not going to be Joe Webb. Those are the 2 quarterbacks who started games or played for the Buffalo Bills at quarterback last season, aside from Tyrod Taylor. You don't have to worry about those guys. Peterman will probably be brought along as, a third string. We spent some draft capital on him. We want to see if we can develop him a little type of deal. As for free agent quarterbacks, who can fill the void aside from drafting a player, which I assume with the draft rolling up soon, we'll have a nice little Trust the Podcast draft special. That'll be a little further down the road. But right now, the free agent market is already, free agency hasn't started yet, and the free agent market is already starting to dry up. You've got Sam Bradford in Arizona for silly money for Sam Bradford. You've got Case Keenum going to Denver. You've got Kirk Cousins going to Minnesota. You've got Teddy Bridgewater reportedly going to Minnesota, or not Minnesota, coming from Minnesota, going to the New York Jets. And you have to wonder, is this organization going to go out and pick up a guy like A.J. McCarron? Are they going to go out and pick up a guy like Josh McCown and just kind of say, look, you're the starter day one, unless, player X, Y, or Z that we draft outplays you. And I think that's where they may be headed at this point.
Yeah. At this point now, after yesterday's move to move up to 12, I almost don't care who they bring in free agent quarterback-wise at this point, because whoever that person is, they're on a clock. And it's going to be, they're basically just keeping the seat warm until somebody, like, hopefully, I'm going to assume some things here, somebody like Rosen or Darnold or Mayfield or maybe Jackson is selected. And I'll be honest, with all the moves that this team has made in the past 2 years, even the Peterman thing, starting him against the Chargers, like, I kind of understand where they were coming from when they did that. the national media, I think it's kind of confused with the Tyrod narrative, but I kind of understand where they were coming from. I mean, I'm giving them a pass on that. I'm saying all that to say that I trust, whoever they select in the draft, I'm trusting them. So that it's their guy and that they're going to get who they want, because they've already showed that they don't settle. So we'll see what happens. But
anyway,
you
know what? We don't want to sound cliche and kind of stupid, but really, there's a process. We're trusting the process. We're letting them. It's not Tom Donahoe sitting there and you're going, what is this guy going to do now to screw the team up? You've got a guy who knows how to build a winning franchise, build a winning football team, and put out a good product. They've got good evaluators there, and they say, you know what, we need to go out and get. They go out and they get Vontae Davis. I mean, yeah, he's had a checkered injury history, and he may not be able to be relied on too much, but there's potential there, and the risk may be worth the reward. And that those kind of moves, like those kind of under the radar, shrewd kind of moves that you're not used to the Buffalo Bills making, and that's kind of nice to see. And I mean, like you said, it's hard in the moment. Hindsight being 2020, it's always nice to step back, take a look, and say, hey, you know what? I understand why they did that. I'm not a fan of why they did it. I'm glad it didn't hurt the Bills in the long run, but I understand it. And at this point too, it probably helps for our sake, for AM radio's sake as well, that Nathan Peterman started a game and played in a couple games, because can you imagine, Dell, with the Buffalo Bills going into the offseason saying, we don't know what Nathan Peterman's going to be because we haven't seen him play yet. And then you've got people saying, oh, we don't need A.J. McCarron. We don't need a Josh McCown. We need Nathan Peterman's going to be the guy. And I don't know if I could deal with that, because, you see, like I have friends, close friends who are Jets fans. It happens. We live in the area. We live in New York. I mean, they're in New Jersey. Don't try to say you're a New York football team if you play in New Jersey, but whatever. You see, Josh McCown had a career year last year, but the thing about Josh McCown that sells me is not so much on the field as off the field. They said that he essentially acted as a player coach, because he knows the game inside and out. He can help the younger players learn. And look at, if the Bills are going to sit a quarterback for half a season, a full season, that's the kind of guy I want. I would want a Josh McCown where you can say, hey, look at, you can probably go out and win 8 or 9 games with him, no problem. But his presence will be so much more important, and that's what I'm interested in with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, that's probably where I'm at as well. Like, I think out of the free agents that are currently available, McCown's probably the one I'm most interested in. I think A.J. McCarron probably looks at himself as someone who deserves to be a starter and has still a relatively long career ahead of him. I don't want there to be any confusion with with the free agent quarterback they bring in. Like, listen, dude, you are here for a specific purpose, and that is to get our rookie some time to get acclimated to the game, and then it's your turn to run off into the sunset. And whether that's a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, I'd be more comfortable with the Bills signing a free agent quarterback to a 1-year contract. And I don't think McCarron's going to do that.
Now I know we're running close on time, and I know we're kind of running through the podcast quick. I'm going to challenge you to something, Dal. Can you give me, before we move ahead and look on in the distance and see what's going to happen here, can you give me a 30-second to 1 minute wrap up of what is the latest over at 26shirts.com?
Oh, yeah, cool. So we just finished with the Kyle Williams design that we did. It was our 7th best-selling shirt in Buffalo ever. When you hear we've been doing this now, 26 shirts a year for 4.5 years, that says something. So thank you to everybody who purchased a Kyle Williams shirt to help Jacob and Alexander Green. They got a long road ahead of them with the loss of their parents at the Zor Valley accident back in August. Hopefully by raising just about $7,000, hopefully we've helped out with that a little bit. So thank you to everybody who did that. Right now we moved it up because normally it's the 12th shirt of every volume that we do a Jim Kelly themed design. We moved it up based on the news. The cancer has returned for Jim Kelly. So we have a Kelly Tough design, which is actually modeled directly off the wristband that we sell at the website as well too. And so we said, let's put it on the shirt. People like it so much, and it's people are ordering that, and they're doing their best to show Jim Kelly support and support Hunter's hope. And that's what we're going to be doing for the next pretty much 2 weeks, is selling that Kelly Tough shirt to benefit Hunter's hope. And then keep an eye out later this week. We're also going to have a Dingus Day design, which people always love too. So look for that as well.
Very good. You did well. A little more in a minute, but it's okay. We got the important news across. Now I want to talk about important dates to pay attention to. The legal tampering period has begun, as obviously you've seen on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You've seen news reported that that players have agreed to sign places as of March 14th at 4 p.m. The new league year begins and free agency officially begins. April 26th is the date to circle on your calendar for the NFL draft. With the Buffalo Bills now owning the 12th and 22nd pick, Mike Rodak of ESPN points out, using a conventional trade chart, the Bills have 1,980 points between picks 12 and 22. That's enough to get them to number 4, but not to number 3. Number 4 is 1,800. Number 3 is 2,200. If you add pick 53, that gets you to 2,350. Adding pick 56 gets you to 2,690, or more than the value of the number 2 pick, 2,600. Now, I don't think the Bills are going to trade both firsts and 2 seconds to get to number 2 or to number 3 or wherever they decide to move up to. But that just tells you where the Bills are at right now. And that just pretty much tells you got to stay woke. Pay attention to what's going on here, because the Bills have put themselves in a position to go out and get Josh Rosen, which I have to throw out a little hat tip there to our buddy TJ Luckman, the woke quarterback. I'm down with the woke quarterback. Give me Josh Rosen, but you've got Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Sam Darnold. I almost forgot. So any one of those, the Buffalo Bills could trade up for, and they have the capital. So just stay tuned and pay attention. Have a lot of fun. Enjoy yourself, because it's going to be a fun ride from here on out.
Absolutely. It's you know what, to be honest with you, a really quick point I want to make is that I don't care how much, if they have a guy that they feel is the guy, I want them to do whatever they have to get him, because there's always that story about how the Bills were so close to trading up for Roethlisberger, but they just couldn't do it. And would you have given up something along the lines, that was 2004, so would you have given up Lee Evans, J.P. Lossman, Dante Whitner, and John McCargo for Ben Roethlisberger?
Yeah, hindsight being 2020.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So hindsight being 2020, and there's different people running the draft now than there were back then. But you know what I mean? Like, let's not get too attached to the capital. Like, if there's a guy that's going to change your franchise, you make that trade.
You can't be afraid to make that move, and I don't think the Buffalo Bills are afraid to make that move at this point in time. But, Del, I know you got to go, so we'll just wrap it up here. We'll say we appreciate you tuning into this kind of Trust the Podcast minicast. I'm Ryan Wolfe, at WolfeBLTD. Del Reid is at Del Reid on Twitter, at 26shirts. Check out 26shirts.com. BetterLiveThanDead.com. Follow us on Instagram, or not Instagram. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Also, subscribe on iTunes and Google Play Music at the latest podcast. And with that being said, as always, trust the podcast.
Go Bills, baby.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.